Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. And so it begins, the 5th season of Billboard Breakdown, the 5th year I've been making this weekly show, and what many folks have outright told me is the biggest draw to this channel. And you know, deep down there's a part of me that does have some optimism for the future, and the rough hope that things will somewhat improve in 2019, following off a particularly rough year in 2018 that might not have been as bad as 2016, but certainly feels close. And yet, if this week is any omen for what's to come, yeah, we'll get to it. But first off, our top 10. And, you know, I'm not exactly thrilled that Thank You Next by Ariana Grande is still at number 1, given that I'm still kind of underwhelmed and ambivalent about the song. But, you know, you can't really deny that despite losing the top spot on sales, the streaming is still really impressive, and you can't deny its radio attraction, especially with the video coming. And it certainly feels stronger than Sicko Mode by Travis Scott at number 2, which might be holding onto its margin on streaming and picked up sales gains, but it's not quite dominant enough on radio to hold a play there. And to me, it seems very vulnerable to Happier by Marshmello and Bastille at number 3. Yeah, sales on radio have eased off just a little bit, but its streaming is solid and it's got the sort of inertia to capitalize on losses elsewhere. But what might be the larger contender right now is Without Me by Halsey up to number 4. Top spot on sales, solid radio gains, a good streaming presence, not quite dominant anywhere, but enough across the board in order to hold its own, and it's likely got room to grow. Compare this to Lucid Dreams by Juice WRLD, which might have regained a spot up to number 5 and still has good streaming, but that radio's dropping hard, and that means it's very much vulnerable to High Hopes by Panic at the Disco up to number 6, which sees the top spot on the radio and has real sales presence, even if its streaming is absolutely lousy. Then holding on to number 7, we've got Mo Bamba by Sheck Wes. Huge streaming to the point where he doesn't really care that much radio never got on board, although the sales are better than you would expect. And taking another dip to number 8, we got Girls Like You by Maroon 5 featuring Cardi B, as it is just bleeding everywhere, but it's got enough YouTube to stem its immediate collapse. Then actually picking up a slot, we got Drip Too Hard by Lil Baby and Gunna at number 9. Again, all it really has is streaming and YouTube at this point, but I reckon its gain is more because of the collapse of ZZ by Kodak Black featuring Travis Scott and Offset down to number 10. Yes, I saw that it got a video, but that doesn't eliminate the fact that its sales are lousy and it's got no solid radio traction. I don't see this rebounding as much as everybody seems to predict it will. And this takes us to our losers and dropouts, and there are a few considerable ones in the latter category, like Big Bank by YG featuring 2 Chainz, Big Sean, and Nicki Minaj, which will make the year-end list for 2018, and Jackie Chan by Tiesto, Dzeko, Post Malone, and Preem, which along with Drew Barrymore by Bryce Vine, they will not. And as for our losers, look, none of these are all that surprising. In particular, those capitalizing off of XXXTentacion's death, they did not have a great week, with the Bad falling down to 39, and falling down with the late Little Peeps getting down to 84. But that would also ignore the failings of 1400 999 Freestyle from Trippie Redd and Juice WRLD losing off the debut down to 68, as well as Don't Come Out the House by Metro Boomin featuring 21 Savage continuing down to 78. Beyond that, I don't know, you could predict that Lose It by Kane Brown would lose off the album boost to 40, and that Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen would get the expected jolt down to 50, but what actually I'm kind of annoyed about is I'm a Mess by BB Rexa falling down to 59. I mean, this couldn't have happened a few weeks ago amidst all those album bombs keeping up the year-end list proper for 2018? Seriously? Now, as you would expect, given that we are heading into the holiday season, our list of gains and returning entries has slowed down to a crawl. Seriously, we only got 1 gain this week, and it's going to Arms Around You by XXXTentacion, Lil Pump, Maluma, and Swae Lee up to 49. Just goddamn wonderful. Now, thankfully, we did get 3 generally enjoyable returning entries. Electricity by Silk City and Dua Lipa featuring Diplo and Mark Ronson back at 94. Lovely by Billie Eilish and Khalid back at 80, and like with every year, All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey is back at 29. Breaking through a little earlier than ever, so will this be the year where it makes the run for the Christmas number 1? I don't know, we'll see. And hell, we only have 6 new entries here, but before we get to those, I've been thinking about ways to add some new features to Billboard Breakdown when we do have only a couple songs that got through. Now, normally I've got my world hit selections, but the issue in the past year is that I often encountered is with an increasingly global music presence and fewer barriers to global crossover for a lot of songs, a lot of the charts worldwide have started to converge and show all the more overlap. Hell, if you're wondering why I rarely use my old tagline, the Canadian charts are always better, besides Drake, that's one of the reasons why. So what I'm gonna do instead is introduce something that's a little bit more unique to this show, and something that I might introduce with more frequency than your average world hit, where I identify a song that could have been in the prime position to chart for this week, but for some reason it never did, and likely never will, no matter how much that I would personally prefer, because I'd like to say these songs are pretty great. So for this inaugural episode of Ideal Hits, hey, you know what? She got a returning entry. Let's see what she's doing now.
Ooh, shots around me, playing confessions and our bodies blending. Ooh, I'm in love, it's true. Yeah, damn, I'm fixed with you.
So as all you know, I reviewed Mariah Carey's newest release, Caution, just a couple days ago, and now I'm going to create a mainstream but subtle update to Mariah Carey's sound, with this being the lead-off single. And yet, it looks like the only Mariah that folks want to hear is the old stuff. But if you're looking for a song that could have easily charted with more streams and a better sales and radio push, let's talk about With You, which fits more seamlessly into the mainstream than you would otherwise think. DJ Mustard's piano-based production, it's low-key but adds enough of a bass knock and snap to this sort of silky R&B slow burn, and when you factor in the conflicted long-term relationship, the references to the 90s, and the very conversational style of writing with the profanity, you know what, even the subject matter kind of fits. Of course, the biggest factor becomes Mariah Carey herself, who is head and shoulders above so many in mainstream R&B in terms of vocal timbre and charisma and gentle ease, that you have to wonder if she was just kept off the list for overachieving here, or just being the difficult personality that is Mariah Carey. Man, such a great song. This really could have been an ideal hit for me, and I really needed it before we get into our new arrivals. Starting off with number 100, Burn the House Down by AJR.
You got something to hide. We gon' burn the whole house down.
I have to be honest. I was expecting to encounter AJR in the Hot 100 well before today. I thought they'd have that crossover single, pushing their faux independent caterwauling months if not years ago. And incidentally, while I am here, I might as well correct something from my review of The Click, because AJR is no longer on Warner Bros. Like they were for their first album. I did misspeak there. Blame the fever and the general illness I had when I filmed that review. But they sure as hell signed distribution and publishing deals with Red and BMG, along with a singles deal tied to Black Butter, which are all subsidiaries owned by Sony, and they never would have got that without the main push, so my general point stands. In any case, this song was not present on The Click, and thus this is my first exposure to it. And here's the thing, by the standards of AJR songs, it's not the absolute worst I've ever heard from this group. It's got some facsimile of a groove, and that rinky-dink piano they push onto the bridge, it's not bad amidst all the squonky synthetic horn pickups, the fake hand claps and percussion, the huge sandy whooshes, and all the chipmunk vocals. It's all painfully squeaky clean, sounding all the more plastic and grating thanks to the band's precise ability to pick precisely the right tone to piss me off. But you know what? I've liked music this polished, if not more so. Hell, I've defended S Club 7 multiple times, for God's sake. But at least S Club 7 didn't try to write a message song calling for revolution. Now, revolution for what exactly, AJR never bothers to mention directly. But that's because this song isn't really about any one cause, no matter what their frontman stammers on about. But just like on The Click, the thought of actually standing for something when it's becoming abundantly clear that they'd rather appropriate the vague construct of provocative ideas rather than take an actual stand. And what's so damn insufferable about all of this is that there's no evidence that AJR could even actually make the heavy, controversial material they allude to. It feels like a spiritual successor to Feel It Still by Portugal the Man more than anything, but at least that song was kind of upfront with the hole steadily being punched in its ironic detachment. AJR, meanwhile, they seem content to second guess and minimize any movement by describing those marching on the bridge as every stranger on Twitter. You know, the New Radicals, they weren't convincing with their flimsy revolutionary movement in the late 90s with You Get What You Give either, but at least they could sell it like they actually believe what they were doing. No, what this represents at its most is a band that's seeing the youth zeitgeist start to slip away from them, and they want to hang on to an organic movement despite being just as propped up by the machine behind it, even if they don't want to admit it. And thus there's a certain twisted irony that the only reason so many kids probably know about this song is because it and the band were featured in a party montage on a David Dobrik video that featured Kendall Jenner. Frankly, for what this song is trying, that is punchline enough. Number 99, Girl Like You by Jason Aldean.
And I don't wanna let you go. I've never met a girl like you.
Most of you might not remember the year that I put a Jason Aldean song on my list of the best songs of the year. Not just the hits, all songs. And man, ever since then, he's just continued to give me evidence that I gave him way too much credit. And this, another prime example of that. Flattening out the guitar on the verses, relying more on a chopped up vocal sample for melody, and the oversold sandy mess of a hook that even sneaks in a few stuttering trap progressions in the hi-hat. Because why not? When you have nothing close to sensuality in your delivery or content, it just defaults to brainless bro country, might as well try to stand out in the worst goddamn ways possible. Yeah, unsurprisingly, this blows. Next, number 98, Close to Me by Ellie Goulding and Diplo featuring Swae Lee.
And I don't wanna be somebody without your body close to me.
So no joke, when I was first drafting this whole series, I literally forgot this song was new this week, and I have no idea why I did, especially as I've been wondering for a while when Ellie Goulding would make her return after an album that I was very hard on in 2015, but it still had some tremendous highlights. So with this, decent enough, I guess. Ellie Goulding's got a lot of eclectic personality that rarely gets the credit it deserves, and I like some of the lyrical details of being kind of shitty people together, but it also kind of overruns whatever Swae Lee tries. He's just not in her lane. Sadly, it just can't overrun Diplo's production. Seriously, give her a more delicate groove or a cleaner vocal pickup, because between the damp lo-fi acoustic pickup, the tinny trap touches, the blocky bass, the scratchy percussion, it's a density that doesn't flatter anything, especially Ellie Goulding's voice. That's where we get those squonking synths that are dropped over to the bridge that didn't need to be there. Overall, I don't know, it's not bad, but man alive, Ellie Goulding has so many better songs than this. I hope it's not her comeback. Number 97, Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish.
Never falling from quite this high, falling into your ocean eyes.
So I've been waiting for this to creep onto the charts for a while now. Billie Eilish has been quietly building up a lot of swell in the bottom half of the Hot 100, and she had a particularly good week here, with this being her newest crossover. And what's important to note with this is that it's a much older song than many that have crossed over thus far. It was originally released back in late 2015. It's a more soft and placid listen than the brittle, unnerving songs that she won me over with, but you know what, I still reckon it's actually pretty good. Tasteful multi-tracking, breathy melodies, a sparse bassy beat that probably owes a little bit more to Lana Del Rey than I would expect, and the fear of falling hard for somebody who has hidden unscrutable depths, but who can detach just enough and leave people behind incredibly easily. It's just a really well-structured, very minimalist pop song. But you know what, if we're making comparison to the glassy, slightly unnerving cuts like You Should See Me in a Crown, or the excellent low-key stunners like When the Party's Over, or even Lovely that came back this week, doesn't quite hit in the same way. Still really good though, so yeah, check it out. Number 92, Twerk by City Girls featuring Cardi B. And now to pretty much the other side of the emotional spectrum. And you know, it's funny. I've always been curious what newer acts that Cardi B would elevate thanks to proximity to her success, and thus far I haven't had much room to complain. Partisan Fontaine has the charisma and presence to be credible in his own right as a hip-hop artist, but the more exciting act to talk about here are City Girls, who got their first burst of popularity thanks to Drake and In My Feelings, and now with this collaboration, it's not exactly helped by one of their members going to jail for fraud for 2 years, but the songs here are all the same, and it's actually pretty damn good. Helped out by a big propulsive masterpiece sample that builds to a really great hook with real buildup to that nasty synth line, a lot of scratching, and some trap flourishes that feel some pretty natural without overwhelming the groove. And when it comes to the verses, okay, look, I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm wowed by any of them. The hook really carries this song, mostly because I think only giving any of the girls or Cardi B 12 bars, it just feels a little bit like they're in too much of a hurry to get back to the hook, and the content really is pretty basic flexing. But you know what, for this sort of basic track to establish city girls on their own in the scene, I think it's effective. Hell, they got better construction and control of their flows than most of the guys I cover, so speaking of which, number 81, Take One by Kodak Black.
I'm on house arrest, but I'm in take one. That pussy biting, so I pay to get a lace done. That nigga dissing on the ground, but I ain't saying nothing. And I ain't tripping, I'ma get him when that day come.
Alright, let me say this. I actually kind of like the production on this. Yeah, the bass is a little bit too heavy, but that warped melodic sample contorting behind Kodak Black's got some snarled weirdness that I actually kind of like. Shame that's about the last thing I like on this song. Mostly hurt by Kodak Black's slapdash flow and slurred delivery as he spends the track going at 6'9" for his current legal turmoil and the likelihood that he'll snitch on the slew of people caught up in this whole disaster surrounding him. Probably not the best thing, Kodak, for you to include, as well as references to you hiring shooters on a song where you admit you're on house arrest, but whatever. Really, my bigger issue is the flubbed rhymes. Months with something, it with want, real with live, and chill with tear, all in a song where he keeps slipping away from the main diss to talk about all the sex he's having while on house arrest. Although the interchangeable usage of the word pussy to describe both 6ix9ine and the girl does lead to several amusing parallels that I could make, but whatever. It's decent production spoiled by a lousy rapper. In other words, it's nothing new for this year. Let's move on. So yeah, this week was kind of a mess, but the best and the worst, they fall out fairly easily. You know, the best, you know what? I'm gonna give this a tie this week to both Twerk by City Girls and Cardi B and Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish. A lot of potential for the both of them. I hope 2019 is great for the both of them. Now for the worst, you know, I'd say it wasn't much of a competition, but then you got Jason Aldean and Kodak Black put up some real turds, but AJR and Burn the House Down's got a lock on this. The perfect storm of awful incomprehensibility to set my teeth on edge. So yeah, I'm not sure where we can go from here, but let's hope 2019 keeps things interesting. Well, I'm not gonna even hope for quality, but you never know what'll happen. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.